jet cut through the night sky like a silver blade. Inside, billionaire Ethan Cole stared out the window, his reflection merging with the clouds. For years he had been gone, chasing empires, building wealth, forgetting what it felt like to hold his son. Now he was coming home. But what waited for him would shatter everything he thought he knew. As the plane descended over the quiet fields of Virginia, memories began to stab through the silence. The last time he'd seen his little boy, Noah, the child had been lying in a hospital bed, motionless, silent, tubes running through his fragile body after a car crash that changed everything. Ethan remembered his wife's eyes that day, full of blame, full of pain. And then Ethan had left. Business, he said. Meetings, investments, expansion. But truth be told, he had been running. Running from guilt, from the image of his son's broken body. Now, 5 years later, he was finally returning to face it all. Scene 1. The arrival. The black limousine rolled up the long driveway of the Cole estate. The mansion stood silent against the pale dawn, its windows dark, its walls cold. The driver opened Ethan's door. "Welcome home, sir," he said softly. Ethan stepped out, inhaling the damp morning air. His shoes crunched against the gravel. Everything looked the same. The fountain, the rose bushes, the grand staircase. But something felt off. As he walked toward the door, his heart pounded. Would Noah even recognize him? Would he hate him? The heavy doors opened before he could knock. Standing there was Martha, the housekeeper. Her eyes widened as she saw him. "Mr. Cole. My God, it's been so long." Ethan nodded awkwardly. "Where's Noah?" Her lips trembled. He's outside, sir. In the garden." Ethan frowned. Outside? At this hour? But she didn't answer. Instead, she just stepped aside, as if unsure how to explain what he was about to see. Ethan followed the stone path toward the back garden. The morning fog hung low, the sound of birds echoing softly. And then he froze. There, near the old oak tree, a sight that made his chest tighten and his breath catch. A tall, dark-skinned woman was walking slowly across the grass, her back slightly bent, and on her back was a boy, his son, Noah. The boy's thin arms were wrapped gently around her neck, his face pressed against her shoulder, smiling. Ethan couldn't move. For years, the image of his paralyzed son had haunted him, lifeless, fragile, broken. But here he was, alive, laughing, on someone's back. The woman turned slightly, her face glowing with warmth. Her name, Grace, the maid he'd hired before leaving. Noah's voice rang through the garden. "Faster, Grace. Come on, I'm flying." Grace laughed. "You'll have to hold tight, little man. I'm not a jet like your daddy's plane." The words stabbed Ethan's heart. He took a step forward, his throat dry. "Noah?" The boy froze. Grace turned, startled, her eyes meeting Ethan's. For a moment, silence swallowed everything. Noah blinked, confusion spreading across his face. "Mom!" he called out. But his mother wasn't there. Only Ethan, the father who had left. Grace gently lowered Noah to the ground. "Mr. Cole," she whispered. Ethan knelt, his voice trembling. "Noah, it's me." "It's Dad." The boy looked up at him, studying his face like a stranger. "Dad, you came back?" Ethan felt the sting in his chest. He forced a smile. "Yeah, buddy, I'm home." Noah's eyes filled with tears, and not from joy, but confusion. "Why now?" he whispered. Ethan wanted to explain, to tell him how much he'd missed him, how every night he thought of his laughter, his small hands, his voice, but words refused to come. Grace stood behind them, silent, holding Noah's wheelchair. Ethan finally found his voice. "You're walking? I mean, you can move now?" Grace's tone was gentle. "He's getting better, sir. Slowly. Physical therapy, small exercises, and a lot of faith." Ethan turned to her. "You helped him?" She hesitated. "Someone had to." That hit harder than any insult. He looked back at Noah, who sat quietly in the chair now, his small fingers fiddling with the wheels. Grace adjusted the blanket around him, her hands steady, protective. Ethan noticed the way Noah looked at her. Trust, love, safety, emotions that should have been for his father. Later that evening, Ethan stood on the balcony, staring at the horizon. Grace approached him quietly. "You shouldn't have come back without warning," she said softly. "The boy's been through a lot." Ethan turned sharply. "He's my son. I have every right to see him." Grace didn't flinch. "Then where were you when he cried for you at night? When he begged to hear your voice?" Her words sliced through him. Ethan exhaled, pain tightening his jaw. "You don't understand—" "No, Mr. Cole," she interrupted. "I do. You ran away. Because facing pain was harder than earning billions." He said nothing. Because she was right. Grace turned to leave, but Ethan stopped her. "Grace, thank you. For keeping him alive." She paused, her eyes softening. "He kept me alive, too." And for a moment, a long, heavy moment, Ethan realized something. Maybe love wasn't about money, or success, or power. Maybe it was about being there, when it hurt the most. That night, Ethan peeked into Noah's room. The boy was asleep, his tiny hand resting on Grace's arm as she sat beside his bed. Ethan stood in the doorway, feeling like an outsider in his own home. He whispered to himself, "I'm going to fix this, somehow." Grace opened her eyes. She had heard him. But she said nothing. And in that silence, Ethan Cole, billionaire, tycoon, absentee father, realized that redemption wasn't going to come easy. What happens next will break your heart. When Ethan discovers what Grace has been hiding, everything changes. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The mansion felt colder than he remembered, the kind of cold that seeps into your chest, reminding you of everything you've lost. He had returned home as a billionaire, but he felt poorer than ever. From his bedroom window, he could see the faint light from his son's room. Grace was still awake, sitting beside Noah's bed, humming a soft tune. The same tune Ethan's wife used to sing before she died. That sound hit him like a wave. He pressed his hand against the glass, his throat tightening. How could he have left them? How could he have chosen boardrooms over bedtime stories? But as he watched Grace gently stroke Noah's hair, something else stirred inside him. Confusion. How did she know that song? The next morning, the smell of pancakes and coffee filled the air. Noah's laughter echoed from the kitchen, a sound Ethan hadn't heard in years. He followed the sound and paused in the doorway. Grace stood by the stove, wearing a simple white apron, flipping pancakes. Noah sat at the table, his wheelchair beside him, grinning from ear to ear. "Morning, sleepyhead," Noah called out. Ethan smiled, stepping closer. "Morning, champ." Grace looked up, polite but distant. "Good morning, Mr. Cole. Coffee?" "Please," he said. As she poured it, Ethan couldn't help but watch how naturally she moved around. Noah, how the boy's eyes followed her every motion. How comfortable he was. He cleared his throat. "Grace, I was wondering, where did you learn that lullaby? The one you were humming last night?" Grace froze for a fraction of a second before answering. "It's an old song from church, sir. Maybe your wife sang it too." But her voice trembled slightly, just enough for Ethan to notice. After breakfast, Noah wanted to go outside again. Grace carried him onto the porch, setting him gently into his chair. Ethan followed behind, watching silently as she pushed the wheelchair toward the garden. He tried to join their conversation, but every time he spoke, Noah turned his attention back to Grace. She was his comfort zone now. It hurt, more than Ethan could admit. Later that day, while Noah napped, Ethan found himself in the study. Dust covered the bookshelves, and the air smelled of paper and memories. He picked up a family photo, his wife, his son, and himself, taken just a week before the accident. He looked younger then, happier, before greed and guilt stole everything. Then a soft voice came from behind him. "You used to sit here with him every night," Grace said. "He still talks about it sometimes." Ethan turned. "You've been here for 5 years?" She nodded. "Since the accident." "And you never left?" Grace's eyes softened. "He needed me." Ethan studied her. There was something in her tone, loyalty, pain, and maybe something more. "Why?" he asked quietly. "You could have found work anywhere else." Grace hesitated, then looked down. "Because I made a promise." Ethan frowned. "A promise to who?" But before she could answer, a crash came from upstairs. Noah. They both ran. In the hallway, they found Noah on the floor beside his chair, tears streaming down his face. "I was trying to reach my toy," he sobbed. Grace rushed to him, lifting him with practiced gentleness. Hey, it's okay, little man. I got you. Ethan knelt beside them, his heart pounding. We need to get you checked. Are you hurt? Noah shook his head, but his tiny hands clung to Grace, not to his father. That broke something inside Ethan. When Grace carried Noah back to bed, Ethan just stood there, helpless. He had conquered markets and crushed competitors, but he couldn't lift his own son without fear. That night, as Noah slept again, Ethan sat in the darkened hallway, staring at his child's door. Grace came out quietly. Thank you, he whispered. She shook her head. Don't thank me, sir. He's your son. Ethan sighed. He doesn't see me that way anymore. Grace's voice was soft but firm. Then remind him who you are, but not with money. With time, days passed. Ethan stayed home longer than he had in years. He pushed Noah's wheelchair around the garden, told him stories, showed him old photos. The boy began to open up little by little. One afternoon, as they sat by the lake, Noah asked quietly, Dad, why did you go away? Ethan's throat tightened. Because I thought I could fix things from far away. I was wrong. Noah nodded, his small hand resting on his father's. Mom used to say you're good at fixing broken things. Ethan smiled sadly. Except the things that really matter. They sat in silence, watching the water ripple. From the porch, Grace watched them, tears glistening in her eyes. Later that evening, when Ethan went to thank her, he noticed something strange, an old photograph tucked into a frame in her room. He stepped closer. It was a picture of his wife and Grace. Ethan froze. His wife and Grace stood side by side in the photo, smiling, their arms around each other. He turned as Grace entered the room, startled. Where did you get this? Ethan demanded softly. She exhaled, her voice trembling. She was my sister. Ethan's eyes widened. What? Grace nodded, tears welling up. Your wife, Claire, she was my half-sister. We shared the same mother. I didn't tell you because, after she died, you were broken. I didn't want to make things harder. Ethan stepped back, the world spinning. All this time, Grace wiped her eyes. When she was alive, she begged me to look after Noah if anything ever happened. That's the promise I made. Ethan's chest ached as the pieces finally connected. The lullaby, the care, the loyalty. Grace wasn't just a maid. She was family. Ethan sat down, his voice barely a whisper. You kept your promise. Grace nodded. I did what I could. He needed someone to believe in him, even when you didn't. Ethan swallowed hard. You should have told me. You weren't ready to hear it, she said gently. You were angry at yourself, at the world. I didn't want to be another ghost from your past. He looked at her for a long moment. I'm sorry, Grace, for everything. For leaving him, for leaving you to carry all of it. Grace smiled faintly. You can still make it right. And for the first time in years, Ethan believed her. That night, Ethan carried Noah in his arms. Not Grace, but him. The boy laughed, surprised. Dad, you're gonna drop me. Ethan laughed through tears. Not a chance, buddy. Grace watched from the doorway, smiling quietly. For the first time, the Cole mansion felt warm again. But just as peace began to settle, Grace received a phone call that turned her face pale. She stepped out of the room, her hands shaking. Ethan followed her into the hallway. What's wrong? Grace looked up, her eyes full of fear. It's about Noah's condition, she whispered. There's something I haven't told you yet. Grace's secret is deeper than anyone imagined. What is she hiding about Noah's condition? Grace stood in the hallway, her phone pressed to her ear, her hands trembling. The light from the chandelier shimmered against her tear-streaked face. Ethan could feel it. Something was terribly wrong. Grace, he said quietly. What is it? What's happening? She lowered the phone slowly, her lips trembling. It's the hospital. They got the new test results. Noah's condition isn't what they thought. Ethan's stomach dropped. What do you mean? Grace took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. It's not just nerve damage. It's degenerative. It's spreading faster than they expected. The words hit like thunder. Ethan felt the world tilt beneath him. You mean he's getting worse? Grace nodded, her voice breaking. The doctors say he could lose what little movement he has left. Maybe even more. Silence filled the mansion. Heavy, cruel, final. Ethan stumbled back, gripping the wall. No, that's not possible. He was getting better. I saw him. He was smiling, laughing. Grace stepped closer. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to have hope. He still fights every day. But the truth is he's in pain, Ethan, more than he lets you see. Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you just came back, she said softly. And for the first time, he was happy again. I couldn't take that from him. Ethan pressed his palms against his face, his voice cracking. My God, I thought I had time. I thought if I just stayed, if I just tried. Grace placed a hand on his shoulder. You still have time, just not the kind you think. Later that night, Ethan sat by Noah's bedside. The boy was asleep, breathing softly, his tiny chest rising and falling. Machines hummed faintly beside him, reminders of how fragile he was. Ethan whispered, I'm so sorry, buddy. I should have been here. Every day, every night. Noah stirred, half awake. Dad, you're crying? Ethan smiled through tears. Just allergies, pal. Noah chuckled weakly. Mom used to say that too. Ethan brushed his son's hair back gently. She was smarter than me. Noah's voice faded. I'm glad you came back, Dad. I don't feel scared when you're here. And with that, the boy drifted back to sleep, his words cutting deeper than any blade. Grace watched from the doorway, her heart breaking. She had kept so many secrets. But one last truth still lingered. The next morning, Ethan was in the study, searching through medical papers, hospital letters, anything that could give him answers. That's when he found it, a sealed envelope tucked inside a drawer. It was addressed to Ethan Cole, to be opened only if necessary. The handwriting froze him. It was Claire's. His late wife. He tore it open, his hands shaking. Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. And I need you to know something. Something I couldn't say before the accident. Noah's condition isn't just from the crash, it's genetic. It runs in my family. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd blame me. Grace knows everything. I told her to protect him if I couldn't. Please don't hate her for it. She's the only one who can help him now. Love him for both of us. Claire! Ethan's breath caught. His wife and Grace had carried this burden all these years, alone. He found Grace in the garden, sitting by the oak tree where he'd first seen her carrying. Noah, she looked exhausted, her eyes swollen from crying. He held up the letter. You knew? All this time. She nodded slowly. Yes. Claire told me before the accident. The disease. It's rare. There's no cure, only ways to slow it down? Ethan's voice was low, trembling. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were already falling apart, she whispered. If I told you then, you would have broken completely. And Noah needed at least one of us to stay strong. He sank down beside her, his hands trembling. I was supposed to protect him. And instead, I left him to you. Grace turned to him, tears glistening. You can still protect him, but not by running, Ethan, by being here, by loving him like Claire wanted. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the truth. Grace wasn't just a maid. She was the bridge between his broken past and whatever hope was left. Weeks passed. The doctors confirmed the worst. Noah's disease was advancing. But despite the pain, the boy's spirit burned bright. He laughed, he played. He made his dad promise to take him to see the ocean. So one morning, Ethan did. He carried Noah in his arms down the beach. Grace walking beside them, the wind brushing against their faces. Noah giggled. It's so big, Dad. Ethan smiled. Bigger than all the buildings I ever built? Noah looked up. Then you built the wrong things, huh? Ethan laughed through tears. Yeah, I guess I did. They sat by the waves, letting the water touch their feet. Grace whispered softly, He's happy, Ethan. That's all that matters. The boy closed his eyes, whispering, Dad, if I go to Mom, will you be okay? Ethan's voice broke. Don't you talk like that, champ. You're staying right here. But Noah smiled faintly. Just promise me. You'll never leave Grace alone. And then he whispered something only the wind could hear. I love you, Dad. That night, the stars shone brighter than ever. But inside the mansion, the light had dimmed. Noah was gone. Peacefully, quietly. Ethan sat beside his bed, holding his tiny hand. Grace stood behind him, her own tears silent. endless. After a long while, Ethan looked up at her. "He wasn't just my son. He was my redemption." Grace nodded softly. "He brought you home." He looked at her, broken yet grateful. "You kept my family alive when I couldn't. I don't know how to thank you." She placed her hand on his. "Then don't. Just live the way he wanted you to." Months later, the Cole mansion no longer felt empty. Ethan had turned the garden into a small therapy center, the Noah Foundation, for children with mobility challenges. Grace ran it beside him, her warmth guiding every child who entered. Every morning, Ethan walked past the oak tree, the same one where he'd first seen his son riding on Grace's back, and smiled. He could almost hear Noah's laughter in the wind. Grace stood beside him, holding a small photo, Noah's smile captured forever. Ethan whispered, "He'd be proud of us." Grace smiled through tears. "He already is." And as the sun rose over the fields, Ethan finally felt what true wealth meant, not the kind counted in dollars, but in love, forgiveness, and second chances. Ethan lost everything before he learned what really matters. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share it, because somewhere out there, someone needs this reminder. Family is the real fortune.